Hi everyone. It's been a while again since I've posted. I talked a bit last time about how that is that I'm in a bit of a muddle about my reading. I think I'm through that now. I am reading again. I am past my phone-induced reading slump. But I'm not reading as much as I normally would do, and I'm also not particularly ready to speak about a lot of the books that I'm reading. And I was trying to work out why. And it's actually that I'm concentrating on writing at the moment. And that brought me to wondering what the best balance is in my life between writing, reading, and also the other things like I've got going on, like the day job. So I wanted to talk today, and I hope this is interesting to some of you, about how to fit writing in particular around a day job and how that works for me. And I would love to hear how that works for those of you who write, or any questions that you have about how I do this. So I've now written 2 novels and I'm working on a third. The first novel was published in 2016. The second novel is out on submission at the moment, currently called Lisbeth, but that may change. And so I have a reasonable amount of experience of how to fit that together. I work 4 days a week, which sounds like I have potentially a huge amount of time available for writing. That's not strictly true. I have a serious ongoing health condition which takes up all of my day off. And so basically I've tried to find time to write as though I'm doing a full-time 5-day-a-week job, working fairly long hours, but not crazy hours. So this is my experience of how I have fitted writing into my day job life and the rest of my life over the last few years. And as I was reflecting on it this morning, it's changed significantly over time. So I started writing my first novel, The Storyteller, in about 2010. At the time, it was before the health issues. I was working 5 days a week, 14 hours a day in a ridiculously high pressure job. But I had also had it suggested to me by a good friend that I might like to try writing something. He gave me the confidence to try writing something. And so initially when I first started, it was getting out my laptop first thing as I got onto the train for my commute in the morning and challenging myself to write 500 words of something. It didn't matter what it was, I didn't have a plan for what I was going to write, but I had 45 minutes on a train first thing every morning, and I tried to use that to write 500 words of fiction. And that actually worked pretty well. I was maybe 20,000 words or so into that writing, which is what became The Storyteller, when I got really seriously ill. And then all of that discipline and that habit went completely out of the window. I ended up taking a couple of years off work almost entirely. And in that time, my writing habits changed. So then I was very seriously ill. I was in and out of hospital. But in the time that I wasn't in and out of hospital, I had a lot of time on my hands and very few commitments to do it. So at that point, the writing became more intense in the periods I was more well, and then huge gaps in the periods when I was very unwell. And one of the things about being unwell was that I had a lot of time to reflect on life, myself, but also what it was that I was writing at the time, which had an autobiographical component as well. And so at that time, I wasn't well. I wasn't spending a huge amount of time writing, but I was spending a huge amount of time reflecting. And my experience of writing is that I spend considerably more time reflecting on what it might be that I might write than I do actually putting words on a page. So that for me was a period of extensive reflection and a fair amount of writing. And I actually finished writing The Storyteller, the first draft, through that period, and it then came out in 2016 because there's a lengthy stage that you have to go through before publishing actually happens, and a lengthy stage before that during which the publisher is found. So I finished writing in about probably 2013. The book was published in 2016. And then Storyteller sort of under my belt, I went back to work, initially 3 days a week, then 4 days a week. And then it became a question of how to find a writing pattern that fitted with my work life. And I tried a whole range of things. I tried writing every day, which is what I'd done before. And I found that simply, as I tried to deal with the health issues, simply the act of getting to work was already too much. There was no way I could find time first thing in the morning to write, and last thing at night has never been an option for me. I've always been too tired to write at night. I need to write really first thing in the morning before my brain gets stuffed up with other stuff for anything I write to be any good at all. So I tried that pattern for a while, and I really tried forcing that pattern for a while because it had worked for me before, because nearly all of the books that tell you how you should write say you need a daily habit, and it should be first thing in the morning, and you should set yourself a word count or a page count, and you should produce that every day without fail regardless of how you feel. And I really pushed myself to do that, and it didn't work at all, and I was getting very stressed about the writing. Work was difficult, the health stuff was difficult. It just didn't work for me. And I did in that time start writing Lisbeth, but it was mostly in weekends. And it was through a sort of 2-year period that I began to work out what would work for me. I tried word count targets, I tried amount of time targets, I tried doing something every day, I tried doing something only at the weekend. And where I came out was I didn't have the energy to do any writing during the week. I dedicated that time to dealing with the health stuff and going to work, and that was it. And frankly, a lot of the time that was already too much. But what I did try to do was to write something every weekend. So I tried first thing on Saturday morning, first thing on Sunday morning to get some words down. And over time, that became a more regular pattern. And towards the end of writing the novel, I was reliably writing 1,000 words on Saturday, 1,000 words on Sunday, and 1,000 words on Monday morning when I was on the train back to London from home at the weekends. And that pattern eventually settled, but it only worked for me towards the end of writing the novel, when I already had a really clear sense of what it was that I was aiming for every time I sat down to write. And it's this question again of reflection time versus writing time. The stage early in writing that second novel, when I felt I should be setting myself word count targets, it wasn't working for me. And partly that was, it wasn't actually a time for writing words. It was a time for reflecting on what it might be that I might write. It was a time for huge numbers of false starts, some in notes, some in attempts at writing prose, but knowing that everything I did was likely to be wrong and likely to be thrown away. And at the time I found that hugely stressful because I wasn't okay with that. I've become more okay with that in time, and looking back I can see that all of that time, which at that point felt completely wasted, was actually entirely necessary. But I found it very stressful as I was trying to stick to this discipline and do what I thought writers needed to do in order to produce the second novel. And as everyone will tell you, the second novel is famously difficult. So I was also contending with that at the same time. But I in the end got Lisbeth done on this pattern of writing on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And then Lisbeth is out on submission, has been for a year or so, 6 months or so. And then I started again on this new novel, which I'm working on at the moment, which is set in London. It's a London novel of people of entirely different socioeconomic situations from different places, dealing with different things in their lives, and the ways in which they live in the same city but don't ever interact directly with each other. And in that sense, it's a media bubble novel. It has a Brexit element. It's about this vast, wonderful city in which we live, where we can all walk around thinking our world is the normal world and not having any understanding of what other people we pass in the street are facing and thinking about as they go about their lives, what's important to them. It's a relatively big theme. So I started working on this novel probably 6-8 months ago, and I just don't learn. I'm now, my health problems are much better than they were. And that means that my day job has increased in scope and increased in complexity. And actually I'm working harder in my 4 days a week than I have done at any stage in the last 7 years since I got ill. And still what I tried to do was say, I'm going to write 500 words every morning, or I'm going to write 1,000 words every day of the weekend. And again, it didn't work for me. And in the end, I started to approach it differently this time. I knew I wanted to be writing every day, but I also knew that I was unable at this stage in the novel and at this stage in my working life to write good fiction, or fiction that was going to become something every day. So actually I ended up setting myself a different challenge. So from the beginning of February this year, I have written 500 words of something most days, purely for the habit, purely to get myself into that space of expecting mentally that the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is write for a while. So I do that. Some days it flows very easily. Some days I am desperately writing things like, I know I have to get to 500 words today, and so I'm going to tell you about what the weather is like outside. And it's most days it's more of a diary than it is anything that anyone else will ever read. But it's got me into that habit of writing almost every morning 500 words. And I've been doing that since February. We're now towards the end of April. And it has become a thing I look forward to when I wake up in the morning. So now I feel as though I've established point one. Writing is something I do every day and which I enjoy every day. Having got through that bit and having done quite a lot of reflecting in other contexts about the new novel over the last 6 months, I'm now sort of transitioning into the next phase in which I try to write something which will go into the novel at least 3 times a week. And at the moment that is very fragmentary. It is sketches of who potential characters might be, because this is going to be a much more structured, much more thought through novel than I've written so far. Sometimes it's little bits of scenes which may or may not go in, but I'm now trying to wean myself into using some of those 500 words a day to create something which may well end up being part of a novel. And I anticipate that in 6 months' time I will probably be back to my pattern of writing 1,000 words a day at the weekend to ensure that I'm really pushing that forward. But I guess the takeaway for me from all of this has been that, number one, the guidelines for productivity which I read about other people doing do not work for me, or they certainly don't work the same way at whatever stage of the novel I'm at. Number two is that I need time for reflection. For me, that means that I cannot write a chunk of specified novel every day and just sit down and say, okay, today is chapter 4. It's going to be about this person meeting this person in a, I don't know, art exhibition somewhere in London. I'm going to sit down and write that. That pattern doesn't work for me. And I've had to accept that. The third thing is that I have to work around my day job. My day job provides all of my income, but it's also, I enjoy it. I want to do it well. I don't have the flexibility in my life to put writing first and then fill in the gaps with other stuff. And to do that, I've had to sort of separate what days do I do my day job, what days do I do my writing, and that works fairly well for me. And the fourth thing, I think, is to acknowledge what works for me in terms of writing fiction. I am not somebody who plans what they write and then sticks to a plan, and I've talked about that in another video. It's very much emergent. I plan stuff in order to use that part of my brain, but actually what I write is never what I've planned. And the biggest thing for me has been accepting that this is the way that works for me. I've written 2 novels, one of which has had a lot of great reviews, a lot of people have loved it, the second of which I hope is on that pathway, as and when we agree a publisher for it. So I'm doing something that works, and it's part of my health journey as well, but it's been a journey of acceptance of myself and the way that my brain works, to be able to say, this is how I write, this is how I fit this within my life, this is what works for me. So I wanted to put that out there, partly because I've been thinking about it a lot the last couple of months, partly because a lot of my book-related and word-related time has been spent on that rather than on reading, which is why I've been posting less on here than usual about what I've been reading, although I am getting back into reading again, as I said at the beginning. But partly to reassure anyone who is out there and trying to write and finding that the usual productivity things don't seem to be working for them, or who's wondering whether it's possible to find a way of writing that works with a day job that you care about. It is possible, but in my experience it takes some time to get there and to work out what works for you, and that is okay, and that is a journey that you're going to have to take over time to work out how it fits together. So that was what I wanted to say. I'll stop there. If you have any questions about writing process, or any questions about my writing that you'd like me to talk about on the video here, stick them in the comments below. I will happily answer them. And in the meantime, if you're writing, good luck with that. If you're not writing, you really should be writing. Writing is a wonderful thing. And I will look forward to talking to you soon.